think we can start now. Good evening and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining Southend's September monthly meeting, which is slightly different to normal, obviously. This evening we've Mr. Roger Patterson giving us a talk on the Patterson way. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Roger, but for those who don't, just a little bit of background. Roger's been a beekeeper for some 55 years or more, has served as a BBK trustee and is currently a member of BIBBA and vice president of the BDI. He also manages the Dave Cushman website, which over the years I've found to be very down to earth and given some very, very sound advice when I needed it most. So without more ado, I'll hand you over to Roger and hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm pleased to know that everybody is familiar with me. I'm really pleased to know that. Can I say a couple of things before we start, please? There is a Q&A button at the bottom. So if you have any questions, please put them on the Q&A. What we won't do is, well, all the questions will be asked towards the end. What we won't do is identify anyone. So even if your name is there, you won't be identified. So don't be frightened of asking any questions. That's one thing. The other thing is weather related. I live in a fairly rural area, and we've got quite a windy evening here, and we haven't had any wind for several weeks. A lot of our power cables are above ground. So if there is a power cut, then we have got a plan B. So the apologies to start with. So the Patterson unit then. I used to call this presentation a new approach. And then I looked on a website on one occasion to see where I had to go, directions I had to go for a talk. And they had called it, without reference to me, the Patterson unit. Well, as we go through, I hope you agree with me that that's probably a better way of describing it, hence the name, the Patterson unit. You probably know that I've had a book published several years now, Beekeeping, a Practical Guide. Don't worry, there are, I think, 4 more on the way, together with some booklets as well. As Rita's already mentioned, I do own and run the Dave Cushman website. There's masses of information on there, and I'll refer to it a couple of times during the presentation. So why a new approach? Well, it's as a result of changing circumstances. I've been keeping bees 57 years, and things have changed quite a bit in that time. We've now got pests and diseases that we didn't used to have. Also, beekeepers are nowhere near as experienced as they used to be. That's for a variety of reasons. They're not in beekeeping so long, haven't got so many colonies, that sort of thing. So perhaps more mistakes are made, and I'm afraid the standard and quality of bees is a lot poorer than it used to be. Probably as much as anything as a result of importations. But what it has done is meant that we've now got heavier than what I consider normal colony losses. Now that's both summer and winter. And we, up until about 25 years or so ago, it was almost unheard of to have summer colony losses, but these days they're quite common. Could be disease related, could be a starvation. But the main reason I came up with the system I'm about to explain to you is because of the various queen problems that we've had since around about the turn of the century. These are, and I'm sure you know of all of these anyway, early supersedure. When I mean early supersedure, I mean supersedure of young queens, very often within weeks of them commencing laying. failing of young queens during the summer, which never used to happen, and queens just simply disappearing. I'm not going to talk about them tonight, but there is a whole page on Dave Cushman's website. But it's a result of these problems where, to put things right, what I found I had to do was to go and interfere with a normal honey producing colony in order to put another one right. So I think you can see as I go through how I've overcome those problems. Especially during the summer, if you've got a problem with a colony, remedial action is often needed quite quickly, because it seems to me that once a colony becomes terminal, it can actually go down very, very quickly. Now, whether that's disease related, morale related or not, I've no idea. They certainly don't last anywhere near as long as perhaps a colony that goes queenless over winter does. I hope you'll see there are quite a lot of apiary management benefits with this system too. And I hope you can all go away with something that you think, crikey, I can try that. Now, it's not really a new approach. There's very little in beekeeping that is new. What it really is a sort of different approach, and it's really the way the beekeepers look at their beekeeping operations. So what's different about it then? Well, I'll put a question mark here, change of attitude. Some of you may be doing some of these things anyway, but what I find with beekeepers is that very often they see their colonies as individuals. They can give them names if they like, but they think of the blue colony or the red colony or the green colony or whatever. Whereas I've always looked at my beekeeping operation, whatever the size, as one, so that perhaps one colony can help another out. What it's about is forming a block of colonies with one support colony, and these become the unit. And I think unit is actually quite a good name for it. Also, for well over 40 years, I've got my bees to draw out my brood combs above the queen excluder, and that is very much part of this, and I'll briefly describe how I do it. That's it, folks. Nothing more. I could leave you all now, but I'm not going to, because I'm sure you've made great sacrifices to listen to me this evening. If you've been keeping bees more than about 20 minutes, you'll realise that this is actually a very flexible system. And even though you might not take up the whole concept, you might think to yourself, cool, I can use that a little bit with what I do. That's absolutely fine. I haven't got a problem with that at all. There is, however, a warning, as there often is with beekeeping. I move combs around quite freely between colonies. I don't think it's a problem. I think it's grossly overstated. The reason usually given is disease. But the ones that you're really going to be concerned with are probably the two fowl broods. And quite frankly, certainly within the first 2 years of keeping bees, every beekeeper should be able to identify the fowl broods, even though they're so uncommon that they most beekeepers will never see them in their beekeeping lives. But because they're different and distinctive, you ought to be able to see them. So if you are moving combs about, always check for both fowl broods. To make it easy for everybody, including me, I've done a sort of key, and these are really the ends of the combs. So you can see the old comb is black, the foundation's foundation colour, and the empty comb's got nothing in it. So you can see that on the way through. And the full honey producing colonies will be that sort of bluey grey colour, and my support colonies will be bright green, either a full colony or a nucleus, but they're both interchangeable. It really doesn't matter. So there's the key, folks. So if Carl's got to take over, then he knows what's what. So what am I suggesting then? Well, take that as a sort of average apiary. perhaps 4 honey producing colonies. That actually works about as good as anything does. And with it, you have one support colony, either a full colony or a nucleus. Now, the very first time I gave this lecture, which was 10, 12 years ago, I suppose, a man complained bitterly at question time that he's only got 2 colonies, therefore he's completely wasted his time because his system's set up for people with 4 hives. That's not the case. If you've only got 2 hives, you can still use it. You might have to modify it slightly. If you've got 6 hives, let's say, you've got the choice of 1 unit of 6, which will work quite well, or 2 units of 3. Really doesn't matter. And a brood box above the super, which I use for drawing out brood combs. Now you notice that I work on a single brood chamber. If you work on double brood chamber, brood and a half, it's exactly the same. Just modify it slightly to suit your system, whatever it is. So if you look at a typical apiary, unless they're quite a good beekeeper, you find that you'll usually find that not all colonies are fully productive. And if there are any bee inspectors or ex-bee inspectors watching, I suspect they'll probably agree with me. A lot of apiaries that you go into will look something like that. If perhaps they've got 8 colonies, it's basically double what you got in the first place. And if you've got 12 colonies, it's treble. That's very, very similar to the vast majority of apiaries in this country. That isn't being productive. It's not doing the bees any good. It's not doing beekeeping any good. And it's probably not making the best use of good, sound breeding stock. So this is what I'd like to see, all fairly roughly the same. So if you've only got 4 hives, take any of those lines. If you've got 8 or 12, then take 2 lines or 3 lines, whatever. What I'd like to see is them being classified as sort of 3 units in that case, let's say, with 3 support colonies like that. On top of that, each one to have 1 brood chamber with foundation in that the bees are drawing out for a comb. And you'll see the benefits of that as we go through. Now, this is a colony at the bottom of my garden, and it's not set up. It's just a normal colony. So this is how I use brood chambers as supers. It's to get good brood combs drawn, because in my experience, the bees draw them out far better above a queen excluder and away from the brood nest than if you put foundation in the brood nest. I found that out fairly soon after starting to keep bees. What you need is a strong colony early in the season, because you're expecting that colony to draw and fill a brood chamber plus a bit more. So preferably in a colony where you've got 1 or 2 shallows. If you've got 1, make sure you've got some drone comb either in the center or it's full of drone comb, or if you've got 2 supers, make sure the bottom one's got drone comb in it. So what you do is you put the box of foundation, some drone, sometimes I put all drone, but usually there's perhaps 2 or 3 combs of drone in each one underneath the shallows. But what you do is wait until the bees have probably half filled the lower shallow. You've got to get the bees up into the super working well. It works best if you've got a nectar flow on, because of course bees don't draw out comb if there's no nectar flow. So you put the brood chamber underneath, and then when the bees have started drawing in the brood box, perhaps 2, 3, 4 combs, something like that, not too much, you then reverse them. And the reason for doing that is that bees generally don't put pollen in drone comb, they only put it in worker comb. If you left it too long, what would happen is the bees have put an arch of pollen above the brood nest, and if you want to extract those combs, that will cause you obvious problems. Firstly, the extractor will probably go out of balance. Secondly, unless you put the comb straight back into a brood nest somewhere, that pollen will go mouldy and it's wasted to the bees, and it could also wreck the combs. Then you put that above, and the reason that you have the drone comb in the super, of course, is so that you don't get pollen in worker cells in your supers. So that's what I do. So why? Well, I've been doing that for well over 40 years, and I've done it this year quite a bit. I've had the opportunity to because of the weather. I've already mentioned that bees draw comb out far better outside the brood nest. It also gives comb builders plenty of work to do. So those of you who think that if you keep the comb builders occupied, it reduces swarming, that should go a long way to do it. They can then be, if you want to extract them, you can uncap them parallel, extract them, and you've got good combs instantly available. So if you want to make up a nucleus or expand a colony or whatever, you'll find the queen will lay an awful lot quicker in that than if the bees have got to build out a foundation. So you get a quicker build up, and the great thing is that the foundation doesn't go stale by travel, because of course what happens is, as I've already mentioned, bees don't build foundation out unless there's unless they've got an income with which to produce a wax. If they've got no income, either from a feeder, which I never like doing during the summer, or a nectar flow, they just won't build it. So of course the bees climb all over it. You get a week's bad weather, and it goes all sort of shiny really, and you lose the imprints of the walls of the cell, and then the bees start chewing holes in it. So that's why you get poor combs in brood chambers. So I always try and get them on early. I'm in a North Sea rape area, and I guess in Essex most of you folk are as well. So get them drawn out on the rape. Once you've extracted them, if you look after them, make sure the mice can't get in there. They will store for some time, not 2, 3, 4 years even. Okay, you might get a few spiders, but you can deal with them. So what you end up with, looking down on one of these boxes, is nice straight combs like that. And there's a comb of food, probably 4 to 5 pounds of honey in that. So all you do is just uncap it nice and straight, and then after extraction, you've got these lovely combs that the bees will do, you know, a day or so's tidying up, and then of course the queens can lay straight in them instead of that. And that's one of the better ones. I've seen an awful lot worse than that. But if you notice, the bottom right-hand quarter will never ever be comb. The bees just will ignore it. So of course you've got unproductive combs. Right, now back to the unit. This is our Whisper Green teaching apiary, or rather the old one. We moved earlier this year, but this is the old one. There's only part of our teaching apiary. We've normally got about 30 hives in there, and something like 20 or 30 queen mating nukes. But we have groups, and we did this unit system as one group throughout the year. So what it is you take 4 honey producing colonies such as those, and these were the 4 that we used, and that is the support colony that that supports those other 4. If you notice there, it's not a double brood chamber. I just don't work on double brood chambers, only singles. That is a brood chamber being used as a super. So, what's a support colony? Mine's actually planned right from the very start. It's not something I do in a mad panic. It's very variable. It can vary literally from 1 comb up to a full colony. So it's whatever you've got. Its main and real only purpose is to support the honey producing colonies. Although, as you can see on the way through, there will be other uses for it. Now, it may change colonies, and this is where, as a beekeeper, you really must be very flexible. If you see an opportunity and you've got a benefit, take it. It may just be that perhaps one of your main colonies, either it swarmed or you took a nucleus out of it or something of that nature, which made it weaker than your support colony, then just change them. You don't have to change positions. You just change the use of it, the name or whatever you want to give it. Now, it may be out of balance, and as we go through, you'll be able to see why that can happen. As I already mentioned, this was used to demonstrate it was for Green Beekeeping Association meetings, and we have meetings either every 7 or 10 days, something like that. So of course it's just used at normal meetings. We didn't do it last year for obvious reasons. That little colony, or say little, not always little, they work like stink. They're very hard working colonies, and I consider they're the most important colony. But you'll be able to see why as we go through. So, support colony, how do you make it? Well, there's loads of different ways of doing it, several methods and or combinations. The ordinary beekeeper may wish to keep it in their own apiary, so you need to keep the strength up one way or another. And I'm sure you've all got ways of doing that. If you've got an out apiary, the easy way to do it, of course, is to make it up in one apiary and just transport it to the other. So perhaps you could do a swap if you want to, if you've got 2 out apiaries and you want to set up the system in both of them. Now, they will be made to suit your circumstances, whatever they are. I don't know what that's going to be, and at the moment, probably neither do you, and neither do I half the time, because in beekeeping, opportunities get presented to you sometimes when you're not expecting them. Well, the standard nucleus is an obvious one. There's a 5-frame nuke. It may well have come from several colonies, doesn't really matter. It could perhaps just be an ordinary nuke that's bolstered by something else. I would suggest that's probably come from 3 or 4 colonies because, of course, there's a queen cage there. Any of you who've heard my talks about a 2-frame nuke, absolutely ideal. It's on Cushman's website. I'll describe it there. And for those of you who have been listening to the BIBBA webinars, it's on there. And in fact, I believe it's still on the website as a recording for anybody who wants to watch the whole presentation. So basically what a 2-frame nuke is, 1 frame of food. That frame happens to have some brood on. If you have brood, make sure it's sealed, not unsealed. That's not a particularly good example but with just a couple of frames of bees, that amount of food will last it a couple of weeks if it's if the weather is bad. So you put that up against the wall of the hive, and next to it, a frame of sealed brood with adhering bees. Now you need sealed brood preferably. This works much better with sealed brood. If you're keeping it at home, add young bees. There's different ways of doing that, which I haven't got time to discuss here. But you need to make sure that you're not depleted too much. And that's one of the reasons, of course, of having sealed brood, that it doesn't need the looking after that unsealed brood does. Fill it up with drawn comb. You give it a queen cell, and away you go. It's nice and economical on bees. You've got yourself a a new colony there at virtually no cost at all. And in some instances, let's say perhaps like you might want to, you might have a colony that's putting up swarm cells. Take a frame or two away from it, and you know it's killing two birds with one stone. Artificial swarm is another way of doing it. I've never done an artificial swarm for my own purposes, well, not for swarm control anyway. I've done perhaps a modification for another management technique. But if you do artificial swarms, there's a ready-made support colony for you. Or any other swarm prevention or swarm control method that you can come up with. If it means you've got a frame or two of bees, then that's absolutely fine. Or it could be a swarm. And what's wrong if somebody else is providing you with bees? I don't take the attitude that swarms are bad, because I'm finding that certainly if they come from wild places these days, they're usually very good swarms, or the bees are very good, and probably better than those that come from managed colonies. But I should get distracted if I go down that road. So what do you need for your support colony then? A little bit of equipment, but nothing out of the ordinary. You haven't got to buy anything special. You haven't got to make anything. So no specialist equipment. A nucleus box is not essential, but enough a useful bit of kit for most apiaries, and spare hive parts, which most beekeepers seem to accumulate faster than they can use them. So here's one way of making one unit. Perhaps you've got a couple of colonies, or perhaps you've got a few more. Numbers aren't really important. It's best if they're close together because of one or two techniques that I'll show you later on. But it's not particularly important. So if you've got them 10, 15, 20 yards apart, so what? All it means is whatever I tell you, if you want to do it, you've got to find a slightly different way of doing it. But that's okay, because that's most of the fun in beekeeping, as far as I'm concerned, doing something different than what somebody else tells you. Now, if you've got no existing colony that's suitable, then just make one. And if you've got 4 colonies, you can very easily make one. So as the season progresses then, do your normal inspections. Don't forget to get your supers on in time, because that's incredibly important. Don't forget to add 1 brood chamber full of foundation per unit. When you're ready, you can then make your support colony. So that's all so far. It's now a case of how can we use it? So what now? Well, your imagination, your experience, and your circumstances will dictate that. I don't know. Some people come up with some pretty good ideas. Some people come up with daft ideas, and I've got a view that if they're daft enough, most of the time they'll work. So whatever it is, if you think you or your bees are going to get a benefit, give it a crack. Don't go charging off and asking somebody else, because the chances are they'll go and look at a book. It's not in the book, and I tell you not to do it. So if you want to enjoy your beekeeping, You just chug ahead and do things as you want to. It's much better learning from your own mistakes than it is from somebody else's. So let's look at a few possibilities now then. One of which is removing old or poor combs. Now, I guess most beekeepers who've been keeping bees more than 15 or 20 years may well have some old or poor combs. Here's one way of managing them. You can make up your support colony with your old combs from your colonies, perhaps one comb from each colony. Just do it as you like. And don't forget to replace withdrawn comb. What have you done? Half an hour or an hour's manipulation, and you've got one new comb in each of your 4 colonies. So later, perhaps, or perhaps next inspection, or even a week later, when some of those bees have emerged and they've taken up a bit more space, if you then put some more combs in from other colonies, you can shake the bees off, and you've got extra bees emerged in your support colony that will look after it. So you've really only from each one taken a frame of bees. So carry on, do that. So you fill up your support colony. Again, replace withdrawn comb, and hey presto, what you've done, nearly 20% of your brood box has been changed straight away, and you ain't done very much at all. So when your support colony fills the box, you need to be careful, because if some of your combs have got sealed brooding, don't forget, a frame of brood, when it emerges, you get 3 frames of bees, so you multiply it by 3. Some people have told me 2.5. Well, I'm not going to argue about it, just work on 3 because it's a lot easier. And what you'll find is that they will build up to bursting point very, very quickly. So before then, add a brood chamber with drawn comb. Where do you get the drawn comb from? It was produced earlier or last year, and you got it from your shed. There is a shed on the left-hand side, by the way. So when your queen is laying well in the top box, reverse the boxes when suitable, add a queen excluder. Now you can do exactly what you like. You can use the top box as a super. It's going to be quite difficult to uncap because, of course, of all the cocoons. But uncap it, extract the honey, let the bees clean it out, and then of course you can clean up the take the comb out and clean up the frames if indeed they're still good enough to do it, or set fire to them, or whatever you like. Now you'll find there are other ways of achieving the same thing, but that works, and that's what I'm suggesting here. You can still use it as a support colony. So all the things that I'm going to tell you, the benefits of having a support colony, there it is. So if you perhaps want a queen for one of the others, there it is, you've got it. Now, if your support colony has got good comb and it builds up, what are you going to do with it? Well, you could super it. You might as well. That will then give you some extra honey. It can still be used as a support colony, still. If you want to requeen a colony for whatever reason, you want to, the queen in your support colony is better than one of those in one of your main colonies, then just introduce her in a cage in the normal way. Or if you have a bit of a problem, like we do occasionally, such as perhaps the colony goes queenless or has got a drone layer, you could introduce with a nucleus if you wanted to. I'm not going to tell you how to do that, because I'll end up taking up too much of your time. but somebody will help you out with that if you haven't done it before. Now, you need to replace her. If the support colony is strong, you could just let them get on with it and let them produce emergency cells. No problem with emergency cells at all if you know how to use them, how to deal with them. But you could use a queen cell from one of the other colonies, or perhaps that colony if you want to, such as the emergency cell, or even a colony in another unit. Or if you're doing a queen rearing program yourself, or another beekeeper that's got spare queen cells, or your local beekeeping associations doing queen rearing, there's plenty of queen cells around during the summer. So that's replacing a queen. Now, if a colony has a brood break, that gives you an excellent opportunity to help get varroa levels down. So perhaps that colony there has got a brood break. So all you need to do, you've got to get your timing right. But that's all part of beekeeping. Anyway, you should know these sort of things. Put a frame of comb, preferably drone. That's one of the reasons I put drone comb in the brood chambers I use as supers. In the support colony, if it's strong. If it's not particularly strong, queens are sometimes reluctant to lay in drone comb. So put it in one of your other colonies and then just swap the replacement comb in the with one in the support colony. Right, after about 7 to 8 days after she started laying, put that comb in the colony with the brood break. In the meantime, a lot of the brood should have emerged from the honey producing colony with the brood break, so should be on the bees. You then put a nice juicy drone comb in with the larva in the right stage at the right age. The vast majority of varroa will go into the comb, let the bees seal it, and when it's sealed, place it in the freezer for a few days, a week or so. Now, I'm often asked, how long in the freezer? Well, not all freezers are set at the same temperature, but I would say a normal household freezer, I use them about a week. But if it's a couple of weeks, it's probably better than 2 or 3 days. You need to kill all the varroa. And then, of course, you can put that back into another colony if you want to. You can help with swarm prevention. So perhaps you've got a couple of colonies that you think, they're getting strong. Swarm cells fairly soon. Just remove a couple of combs of, or a comb of brood from each one, preferably sealed, but it doesn't matter. Preferably sealed. Put them in your support colony, and then replace with drawn combs, either out of your shed or from the support colony. Haven't built up. Doesn't really matter. Drawn comb rather than foundation, because of course, if the bees don't draw the foundation out very well, you end up with a problem. So you can weaken the support colony if you want to, perhaps to bolster the foraging force of one of the production colonies, or simply to make the support colony smaller because you perhaps don't want to super it. Well, all you do is move it towards the colony that's going to be the recipient, 3 feet at a time. That can be 3 feet several times a day if you want to. And this is one of the reasons why I suggest you have the colonies fairly close together, because you can do a manipulation like this a lot quicker. But if you've got quite a large area and it's reasonably featureless, This 3 feet, an experienced beekeeper could double or triple that if they wish. But of course, you need to do it on a good flying day. Otherwise, if you move too far, the bees come back to the original place if they haven't flown for 2 or 3 days. Leave it there for a day or two in good flying weather so the bees know where their new home is. What you need to do is to add supers to the colony next to it if needed. And depending on the state of the colony and whether there's a big heavy nectar flow on or not, they can easily fill a super in a week, easily, because of course don't forget you're going to be putting extra bees in there, because what you do is move that colony away, so that what happens is the flying bees go out to forage, and then they come back to where they were the day before, can't find it, so they go into the nearest hive which is there, and that's how you can get you can probably almost nearly double the foraging force of the honey production colony. Now, of course, think what's happening. I mentioned imbalance earlier. What's happening is the ratio of foraging bees to the amount of brood. Now, don't forget, brood is incredibly hungry, and that takes up a lot of food during the summer. What you find is the ratio of foraging bees to brood has absolutely rocketed. Therefore, they don't need the food to feed the brood, so they're going to store it. So you can rapidly increase the income of a colony in a manner like this. Now, if it's still strong, the support colony that is, leave it for a couple of 3 weeks, let some bees emerge, and get the foraging force up again. I would say in most cases 2 weeks rather than 3. If it's still too strong, then do exactly the same thing, but with another colony. You could do it with the same one if you want to, but you've already overloaded it. Then move it away again. Now, if it's still too strong, you could do the reverse of what I suggested for swarm prevention rather than control, that is. So if the colony is too strong, then just swap frames of brood, sealed brood from the support colony with frames of food in your honey producing colonies. And that is another way of achieving it. Other option is if you've got 2 or more units, just swap positions with a weaker support colony. If it's very much weaker, then the weaker one just cage the queen, because the influx, the great influx of foraging bees might overwhelm the queen and may kill her. So just cage her for 24 hours and you should be okay. Or you can split for increase. That's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you decide that you don't really want any more bees, that's absolutely fine. You can usually sell nukes during the summer, and if you don't like extracting honey or selling honey or whatever, then why not sell bees instead? If you've got good bees on good combs, then you should be able to find a fairly ready market. Or perhaps for stocking beginners. And wherever I go, I come across beekeeping associations that whinge and whine and moan about all these beginners. They want bees and we can't produce them. You can produce bees a lot quicker than most people think you can. So there's a little bit of income, perhaps, pay for some of the things that you buy for your beekeeping. Or perhaps Add a brood box of comb or foundation. If it's early in the season, then add foundation. If it's fairly close to the end, say halfway through the normal foraging season, add a box of comb. And what you do there is let the bees fill it. If it's early in the season, most fairly strong colonies will fill a brood chamber. If it's towards the end of the season, then feed it. What you do then is you leave it, and it's not only food for that colony for the winter, it's also emergency food for any other colony. So if you go to the second one on the left, let's say, in halfway through January, and it's running short of food, just take a couple of combs out of the top box of the support colony, put it right up against the bees in your main colony, and that should keep them going for certainly 2 or 3 weeks. So it's another thing that I've been doing for 40 some odd years, and it works. I've been doing it anyway without the support system. So at the end of the season, if it's strong enough to overwinter itself, and you want to overwinter, just leave it. Any more than perhaps 4 or 5 frames of that are well covered with bees should get through most winters. If you don't want it, unite it to another colony in the same unit, or perhaps another colony in another unit. Don't forget, this is a really flexible system where you can do exactly what you want. Or perhaps unite it to another support colony. It may well be that you get into early August, let's say, and both of them are fairly strong, but only on 3 frames. You can make a 5 or 6 comb colony up quite easily. Now, if it is small and you want to keep it, towards the end of the season, bolster it with sealed brood from your main colonies. Because don't forget, after a bee emerges, it doesn't forage for, the books will tell you 3 weeks. Well, let's say 3 weeks. So anything perhaps after the 1st or 2nd week in July, it ain't going to collect anything, or not anything worth thinking about. So you might as well take that brood and put it in your small colony to boost it up. And if you do that every week or something like that, another couple of 3 combs, don't forget, 1 frame of brood is 3 frames of bees. You can soon build that up to an 8, 9, 10 comb colony, and you're not depleting the main colonies. So to get back to the same point, it really is a very flexible system. So the possibilities really are endless. There are limits, and that's going to be the beekeeper. So the benefits of this system then, much more flexible management. There's loads and loads of things you can do with it. I haven't asked anybody to buy any extra equipment at all. You can use poorer equipment if you want to. So perhaps the brood chamber floor that you discarded because it had a hole in or something, just put something over the hole, and you can make use of it rather than cluttering up your shed. You can help overcome what I call the modern beekeeping problems, the sort of main queen problems, and that was, of course, is a real reason that I hit upon this. And as I'm sure you've seen, nothing's new. All I've done is just put several techniques together, things that I've done in the past, into one system. Your support colonies can be overwintered. So, of course, the benefit of that is you're making up for winter losses before they happen. Now, many beekeepers have 25% losses. 4 colonies in a unit. If you've got one extra one and you lose one, there's your 25% losses, and you haven't got to scrabble around in the spring to try and make them up again. You can make increase if you want to, because I haven't really explained some of the things you can do with the with a whole lot really. If you want to, you can just make increase almost a nuke a week. The great benefit is that all honey producing colonies are fully productive. You're not ripping them to bits to provide brood or food or a queen or whatever, like I used to. You've got your new brood combs, all of which are well built. You shouldn't get any bad ones out of that, but if you put foundation in the brood chamber, you'll probably find 50% of them are bad. You can replace your older poor combs. You can help varroa control. What I didn't mention was that you can deliberately dequeen a colony if you've got a fairly high varroa count, and you can do exactly the same as I told you with the colony with the brood break. You've got spare queens, and queens really are a very, or good queens, a very valuable commodity during the summer, which of course gives you the opportunity to cull poor queens. And I hope some of you, I hope all of you heard the first webinar last night on the National Bee Improvement Programme. And, you know, this would be an absolutely ideal way of achieving that. So that's it, folks. Thanks very much for your attention. And I have actually finished a little bit early. So any questions, please?
There we go. Thank you very much, Roger. We've got 5 questions so far from people. If people want to send questions in, we can have a go at trying to squeeze them in. If I just fire away, Roger, if you don't mind. Does the support colony have to be amongst the unit hives?
What, physically?
Yes.
Well, no, it doesn't have to. It does make it easier because it gives you more options, such as moving the support colony up to the honey producing colony to milk off the flying bees. But other than that, if you've got them 50 yards apart, it really doesn't matter.
Okay. You mentioned about finding a webinar on the 2-frame nuke. Someone's asking, could you repeat where they would find that webinar, please?
It should still be on the BIBBA website. You should know about this. I think they were still up there a couple of days ago.
It is, yeah. There's a whole host of Roger's webinars up on the BIBBA website, actually, and a few other people. Okay.
And I do describe it on Cushman's website, Dave Cushman's website.
Next question. I must admit, I thought this for years and years. If you take frames from multiple colonies, don't they start fighting?
They can do. But in general, bees from 2 colonies will fight, irrespective of what the conditions are. In my experience, bees from 3 or more colonies very rarely do, unless you get a bad nectar dearth, and then you must do, well, none of your normal rules apply in bad nectar dearth. There are ways you can get over it. Put them in a nuke box, minus queen, obviously. Put them in a nuke box, put the lid on, and just bang them down on the ground, give them a fair old thump half a dozen times. That sorts them out. Never had a problem with that. That's one thing. Another one is if you, why are you grinning?
Yeah, I hope.
Oh yeah, give them a fair old bang. Give them a fair old bang. These are all the sort of things that you won't find in books, but they work, and they work for years. You know, it's us old ones that are going to take these things to our graves if we're not careful. That's one thing. Don't mess around with lavender water or eau de cologne or anything of that nature, whatever that is. Take a brew chamber, empty one. If you want to take, let's say, 4 frames from 4 different colonies with bees, just put them in an empty brew chamber with a gap. So perhaps a frame or a couple of frames of gap. Leave the top off. You need to leave them open to the light for at least quarter of an hour, 20 minutes perhaps, and they won't fight.
Okay.
I think I've got that on Cushman's website.
Thank you.
Yeah, but getting back to the same thing, these are all tricks. I wouldn't quote them in an exam because you'll probably got failed because the examiner probably doesn't even know them. But you know, these things, they work.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. 2 more questions. If you're moving sealed brood to your support colony, or even the other way, do you brush the bees off, or do you transfer it with the adjoining bees?
In general, shake the bees off. Mm-hmm. Because for start, all you're really trying to do is to move the brood. You're not trying to move the bees. And the other thing, of course, is they will fight, or they're likely to fight. You can spray them with syrup and all sorts of things like that, but that's a faff, and I just don't get involved with that. But yeah, perhaps I should have mentioned. Just moving brood like that. Shake the bees off. Just give them a good shake. You don't have to get all of them off, because what you'll find is that younger bees are the ones that are left behind, and they won't fight with anyone. They can't.
Right. Okay. Final question from the participants. Do you ever keep the support colony queenless?
Do I ever?
Keep the support colony queenless.
Be interested to know why the question was asked. I don't normally keep, unless it's for a management purpose, I don't normally keep colonies queenless any longer than I have to. But sometimes perhaps you'll requeen a main honey producing colony, and you just haven't got any form of replacement. Now, at that point, what is most important is I think is most important is the honey producing colony. So you can put a frame of eggs or young larvae or whatever into the support colony if you have to. I'd be interested why the question was asked, because it might just be that I'm giving the wrong answer. So perhaps if whoever's asked a question can say why they asked it.
Well, there was another part to that question which may help clarify. If you unite with another colony for the winter, you'll only need 1 queen, won't you?
Oh, right. Are they asking that if you unite, how long do you leave the support colony queenless? Is that what they're asking, or during the summer?
It's slightly unclear, but I mean, just take a punt with one view. And
yeah, well, let's give the person, the questioner, the answer they want. So if they can ask the question again, is that okay, Carl?
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
There's 1 or 2 other questions popped up then. If other people, if the person that asked the question about queenless can resubmit the question, we can re-ask it. Could you explain again why you put drone comb in supers?
Right. In general, this isn't always the case, but in general, bees don't put pollen in drone cells. They only put it in worker cells. Now, to all intents and purposes, you can say that is true. Very occasionally, I've seen it. I think in a couple of colonies this year, but only a handful of cells, to the point where some clown will pull me up for saying that. But you can almost assume that bees don't put pollen in drone cells. Right. The super that's immediately above the brood nest, bees don't seem to recognise queen cells, queen excluders. Don't recognise queen cells sometimes, I say, yeah. Don't seem to recognise queen excluders. So, of course, they put an arch of pollen above the brood as they would naturally. Now, if you put worker comb in there, the bees fill up the centre, 3, 4, perhaps 5 combs in a sort of arch. I've got to get my hand over the screen. An arch. Now the problem is when you come to extract, you've got this pollen in super combs. So when you extract it, firstly it throws the extractor out of balance, and secondly, what do you do with it? Because if you put it back on the bees, they won't usually use it. If you put it in the shed for next year, it generally goes mouldy, although I have to say that on occasions, if they've turned it into bee bread, usually that seems to be mould free. Perhaps they're doing something to it that stops the mould. So that's why I put drone comb in my supers, so I don't get pollen.
Okay. When you move the foraging bees from the support colony into the production colony, do they not fight as if they're being robbed?
No, because don't forget, they're going out foraging, they're bringing something back. And bees that come back with something are usually accepted.
Okay. And I hope everyone...
Excuse me, let me say, if you've
Sorry.
got a nectar dearth on, then yes, you might have a problem. But I, obviously as an experienced beekeeper, I'll make sure I don't do a manipulation like that when there's a nectar dearth on.
Okay, back to that question about queen lists. The original person's come back with a clarification. Thank you very much. To clarify, at the end of the season, if you choose to unite your support colony back with the main hive, you'll have 2 queens, one from the supports and one in the main hive. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. So to the question, and then sorry, I misinterpreted the question. I thought it was meant during the summer. Okay, right. If you've got a good queen in both of them, quite honestly, good queens are really at a premium, especially towards the end of the year. I would certainly try and keep them going during the winter if I possibly could. If not, then make sure you give the queen away or sell it or whatever to some other beekeeper, so that they can replace a poor queen. I'm afraid I don't like letting the bees sort it out themselves. I don't really know why, because I've never ever known queens that fight one of them be damaged, or not noticeable anyway. So I would remove one of them. In most instances, let's say you've got 4 or 5 colonies, you've probably got one that you would rather not have. It's a bit touchy, a bit spiky or something like that. Then replace it with one of those, let's say the one from the support colony, and then knock the poor one on the head. This is something that I think beekeepers don't do enough. We are dealing with food producing animals, and they're livestock basically. And if there is a problem with them, then culling, I'm afraid, is part of livestock management.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Roger. You've actually answered all the questions that were presented by the participants. Thank you, everybody, who watched from Southend Beekeepers, and thank you to Pat for arranging the whole of the webinar. Very much appreciated, and thank you to Rita for the helpful introduction as well into Roger's talk. That's it for tonight. Go back and sort all your bees out in Southend. You've got a week, and I hope some of you will consider using a brew box as a super and having a support colony in amongst your bees, so that you never have to buy or import bees again, and you can help smooth out all of your stocks. So thank you once again, Roger. Much appreciated.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody. Good night.
Bye.